Well, Katie, welcome today, and thank you for being willing to come on and share your story. Before we get into your story, I just wanted to also not necessarily introduce, because a lot of people will already know him, but we have Anthony here. Say hello, Anthony.
Hello, everybody.
So Anthony is going to be doing a bit of co-hosting with me on some of these interviews with former WMS members. And so we're going to just be talking with Katie, and she's going to be sharing her experiences, what her experiences were as a member of the World Mission Society Church of God, and then, kind of how things have been, what direction she's gone since leaving. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited to hear your story.
Thank you for having me. I actually wasn't expecting to be able to be interviewed so soon, so that was cool.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. And you've been talking with Anthony some, and he knows your story a bit better, so he might be kind of taking the lead here instead of co-hosting, but. Well, go ahead.
That's fine.
Actually, you reached out and you sent us a nice rundown of your experience at the church, and I'm happy to be able to have that story shared. I know it's always a unique experience, everyone who walks through, although a lot of things are exactly the same. Whenever you hear somebody's stories like that happened to me, oh, I felt that way too. But everyone has their own unique scars and unique experiences. And, not to say the whole experience is the worst, experience anyone could ever go through, but it definitely is something that changes you. And it's nice to meet other people who have a similar experience. But, and the way that you reached out and you were able to connect, it was through the email address. Which is Jordan's
WMSCOG answers at greatlightstudios.com. And so that will be in the video description, but that's an email where I have a couple former members that help me monitor that. And so in the past, and I should probably say a bit of an apology, because we were talking about this a little bit beforehand before I started, but I get a lot of emails, and it's been quite difficult to keep up with them all. And so I know there's been people that have reached out, and I might have replied and said, yeah, we should set up an interview. And then 6 months or a year go by, and I realize, oh, wait, I never followed up on that. Or people reach out and they just never hear back from me. And that's not because I don't care about your emails or all of you reaching out. And I try to respond to as many as I can, but it's just the sheer amount of time it has taken to try to maintain both recording all these videos, doing the editing, creating the thumbnail images, keeping up with the comments. I mean, this is a lot that goes into it that I think, you don't really think of up front. But that being said, I created this secondary email to have other former members who can help monitor that and then help keep up with these emails. And so if you reach out to, again, WMSCOG answers at greatlightstudios.com, you might be talking to me or Anthony or Edgar. And so that's the email to reach out to if you want to set up an interview, if you want to get in touch with a former member, or if you just have questions related to all this, and so on.
Yeah. Well, Katie, again, thank you for being open to share your story and your experience. Can you tell us a little bit about, your spiritual background, what kind of relationship you had with church before coming to the World Mission Society, and then where were you in your life and in your headspace when you were approached, and what does that look like when you were recruited?
Yep. So I didn't have much of a church background, so to speak. When I was a kid, my grandmother, who I absolutely love and adore, she's Catholic, so I might go to church with her over a weekend that I stayed at her house or something. So that's what I knew as a kid, was some of the Catholic religion. I didn't grow up going to church. My parents didn't go to church. They really didn't teach anything of the sort in the house either. When I was a teenager, I went to a Baptist church. I'd say I got saved when I was a teenager, but I know I didn't.
Well, what brought you into the Baptist church?
A boyfriend.
Okay.
At the time. So the boyfriend was going to church. He and his family were like, "Oh, you should come with us." I'm like, "Okay, sure." Like, I knew church was supposed to be a good thing, so I'd go to church with him every Sunday. I was baptized there. They had me do the prayer to be saved, but it didn't make me feel any different. That's how I know, I definitely wasn't saved. I was just doing what somebody told me to do. And when we broke up, I stopped going to church with him, but my parents had started going to a Baptist church that was right down the street from where we lived. So I started going to church with them. That might have lasted a few months, and then we stopped going. And that was it for my church life until I was in WMSCOG. I remember it was end of 2020. It was like before Christmas, and I was in Walmart.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I think I'm going to make it a resolution for next year to either get back in the church or at least do Bible study or something. Like, I had that feeling like I should get back into it. And my husband is also a Christian. We both believe in God. We've both been married twice. We're each other's second marriage. And so at Walmart, I was approached and I was asked, "Hey, would you like to do Bible study?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." Like, this is what I was literally just thinking I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do Bible study." So we exchanged numbers. And it wasn't until the beginning of the new year, I think, that we finally started, and it was virtual.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question? Do you think that you're looking for faith had anything to do with, one, it being around Christmas time, and then two, just going through the experience of COVID, like having that sort of isolation and this, like, what's going on in the world feeling? Was that a part of it? Because 2020 was a very unique year for preaching. I remember
it was.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wouldn't say COVID had more to do with it, more so me seeing what it brought out in people.
Okay.
Like the worst. And yeah, the fact that I was looking to get deeper into my faith and such had a huge impact.
So
yeah.
So they scheduled the virtual Bible study with you.
Yeah, we did one. I think the first one we did was on Passover.
Okay.
And it was that or the Sabbath day. I can't remember which one went first and which one came next. But I remember, like, before I started, I prayed. I was like, keep my mind open. Don't let me be, like, judgmental. Don't let me misinterpret anything, ironically. But I also was very ignorant to what the Bible said. I had no idea. I never read it front to back. I knew Genesis a little bit and Exodus a little bit. Like, the main stories, and that's kind of it. And yeah.
What was their approach in Walmart like? Could you talk a minute about that? I guess, like, my curiosity is what was your very initial kind of response, or how did you perceive them right up front? I mean, even down to, like, how like the type of people they were, how they handled themselves, how they were dressed, and then what were the things they said? Because people will wonder, like, how do people get mixed up in groups like this? That's kind of the thought of, like, oh, this would never happen to me. But I mean, was there something about how they approached you, how they looked, how they handled themselves? I mean, anything there you might mention in terms of that initial Walmart encounter?
So from what I can remember of it, I only saw one of the girls. I know that there were two. I don't remember what the second one looked like though, but the one who actually asked me, she was one of the more senior members of the branch. And she was smiling. They were dressed nice. I'm sure I'm sure it was a Saturday. I'm sure it was between services or something, and they were out preaching. And she came up and, she said, "Hi there, sorry to bother you." And she said, I want to say she mentioned something about Sabbath day, or the Passover, or both. She said, we're going around just seeing if you'd like to join Bible study where you'll learn things such as Sabbath day and the Passover. And I'm sitting here like, I've heard of those things, but I don't know about them. Mm-hmm. And so while I'm already in my mind wanting to know more about the Bible and what the Bible teaches, and here are two things that I know are in the Bible that I don't know about, here somebody is offering me to learn. So I was like, yeah. And I'm not going to lie, we exchanged numbers. And then because of my personality, it's hard for me to say no to a complete stranger and possibly hurt somebody's feelings. So I was kind of hoping that she wouldn't get in touch with me again. But she did. And when she reached out, once again, my mind went to, okay, this is meant to happen. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, we'll go ahead and schedule the Bible study. And it just went from there. And even, I don't remember which one it was, when she did do the study on the mother with me, it blew my mind. Like, all I could think, because the whole Elohim thing, where Elohim is God plural, like that's how they get you on that. I didn't realize later I didn't realize until just recently what that actually refers to. But they use it as a way to say, you have God the Father and then you have God the Mother. That's why they say Elohim, and they use it in the plural sense. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's no way. Like, really?
Yeah.
Blew my mind. And I'm like,
they're so sweet. You don't want to question them, or like you don't think that you need to fact check these people.
No. And they're coming straight through verses in the Bible. The church experiences that I'd had weren't a lot out of the Bible that I can remember. Yes. And so the fact that she was connecting verses in the Bible made me think, oh, they teach out of the Bible. Like, never mind the fact that it was literally a verse here, a verse here, a verse all the way over here, and a verse over here. Yeah. Never a chapter, never a book, never any context around it. It's nothing but the context that they give you based on their interpretation of the doctrine. So that's, yeah.
But when you're seeing this for the first time and you believe that, like, wow, like the Holy Spirit is really guiding this, they're showing me like bits and pieces and connecting all it's like a magic show almost.
Yeah. Right.
You know,
I mean,
they connect a word here and a word there.
It's mind blowing. Like, I was one of those people who was blown away, and it's like, oh my goodness, how have I never been taught this? And then you get into them talking about how the other churches don't know and all that sort of stuff.
And let me ask you. Oh, go on, Jordan.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important to emphasize that description you just used of a magic show, Anthony, because that's when I walked out of my first sit down with Edgar, actually. Obviously, I probably knew the Bible a bit better, at least than some people who encountered this group. And so I wasn't in any way thinking, oh, this might be true. I knew it wasn't true, but I walked out of there like, man, that was a wonky thing that just happened. And it really is, because it's and the parallel that I could just kept coming to my mind was like a magic show. It just felt like, it's like, oh, look, I got this coin over here, but when I do this, what do I have? And it's like abracadabra sort of thing. And then you're like, oh, wow, how do you do that? Oh, this must be true. He must be magic. But really, it's because they're behind the scenes. They're practicing daily, hours upon hours, exactly how they're going to, what verses you string together, when you say this, and then you say this next, and then you point to that over there. And it's a, thought through, planned out, manipulative approach to the Bible. And so it does catch people off guard. And that's sort of this, I think, this wow factor that they want to get across to people. That's why they plan their studies the way they do, because they want people to say, oh, wow, look at how they understand the Bible. But really, it has nothing to do with context. It has nothing to do with, the original language of the text. It has nothing to do with trying to figure out what was the author's intention, who was the audience he was speaking to. It has nothing to do with, any proper hermeneutics. It's just about trying to, having a preconceived destination in mind. And then just figuring out, okay, what verses can we pull in to arrive at that destination?
Yeah, you can make like a flow chart, being like, if they say this, then you say that. If they say that, then you say this. Yeah, it's all pre-thought out for you. You don't even need to think about it as a member. You just have been trained to know exactly how to respond to every single question, every single argument. But one of the things also I was going to ask you about, because you did have the Baptist background and the Catholic background, and they go in heavy speaking against the Catholic Church. How did that make you feel about your upbringing and about, your Christian faith before coming into the group? Did it make you kind of feel any sort of way about, your upbringing and your past with Christianity?
I mean, I will say, I was not a fan of Catholicism before this. I mean, I was a fan as a kid because my grandmother, I'll still say to this day, she was an angel on earth. Love her to pieces. But something that truly scared me and made me cry, literally, when I was doing a Bible study with this person, was when she said, if you don't celebrate the Passover, you can't get to heaven. If you don't know Father and Mother, you can't get to heaven. And the first thing I thought of was my grandmother. And I'm like, well, my grandmother, she was Catholic. She would have never been taught this. And all they could say was, God is a just God and God knows your heart. I'm like, well, they better, because if you're telling me that my grandmother didn't make it to heaven, and her being as good of a person as she was and as faithful as she was, given faithful in the Catholic realm, although I think even she didn't like it towards the end of her life because of something they did to her, but that's another story.
Well, yeah, they definitely do feel comfortable bending their doctrine when they feel like it's going to jeopardize somebody's involvement with the church. So they will say clearly, unless you do this, you go to hell. Unless you celebrate Passover and keep the Sabbath and all the feasts and tithe, you go to hell. That's the only thing. But then when like a new person is like, well, what about my grandma? What about, all these other people? They'll tell you, oh, well, like you said, God is just. Everyone will be judged individually. It's according to their deed. So is it according to people's deeds, or is it according to what you're teaching? Because you're saying two very different things. And, they're going to bend their doctrine to sound better, because it's like an onion, like the outer layers that they present to you is more benign. But as you get deeper into their teachings, the more exclusionary it becomes, the more difficult it becomes to find salvation. And that's when the teachings get really strange and weird, when you get more involved and deeper into it. But what they're teaching you at the very beginning when you're learning is, well, they'll trim it back, they'll make it more palatable for a new person, and then they'll say, oh, well, it's just according to, God's judgment on them individually.
Right.
So
yeah. And they'll go back to the whole, oh, if they didn't know the truth, then they'll be forgiven. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, then why are you telling me right now?
yeah. Then why'd you open up your mouth and tell me?
Right.
Yeah, don't go out preaching then. So many people are more likely to get saved because 99% of the people aren't gonna want this baloney about a South Korean mother god. So
and then it's like, and if it's your responsibility if you pass by somebody and you don't tell them anything, like then their blood is now on you. I'm like,
yeah,
that you learn a lot later. So obviously that's not something that's going to turn you away right away. Like, your grandmother possibly going to hell.
Well, but explain what they taught to you when you first arrived. What was salvation?
Salvation was doing everything. You got to keep the feasts. You got to keep the Passover, especially the Passover. You got to get baptized.
But before your baptism, before you decided to join, did they say all the things you needed to do in their eyes?
They didn't. I kind of had to ask. And when they were telling me about Passover, for one, I was like, oh goodness, I need to keep the Passover. How do I do that? And they're like, well, you need to be baptized first. I'm like, oh. And then I go into, well, I've been baptized in my life. So what does that mean? Oh no, you got to be baptized again under the truth.
Yeah.
They haven't told me about Ansang Hong yet. Just keep that in mind.
Naturally.
Oh, wow.
They hadn't told me about Mother either at this time. Because this is about Passover. That was like the first or second study that we did. I was like, okay, so, and whenever I would ask, which was probably after the second or third study, I asked what the name of the church is. And all they would tell me at first was Church of God. I'm like,
yeah, they didn't want you to Google it.
Right. Eventually they did tell me the whole thing because I said, yeah, I was trying to find the church, but I couldn't. I can't, there's so many Church of Gods out there. And so when she did tell me the full name, it was after I had said, and committed to going to service for the first time the next week. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm sure there's going to be bad stuff. I'm sure there's going to be good stuff like there is about anything. So I kept an open mind, and that's part of my problem. So I Googled it. I probably did find more bad than good, but then I made the mistake and I was like, oh, well, they'll say this about anything. And I looked at my sister's church. My sister goes to Elevation, which.
Okay.
So, and they were saying the same kind of things about Elevation. I'm like, see my point. I was looking to prove my own point. And so that was it. And then I think that was after I'd learned about Mother and the Tree of the Water of Life. So I don't remember all this. Tree of Life. Yeah. I'm like, I don't remember the titles of them all anymore, but.
So at what point then did you become introduced to Ansang Hong then? Anthony, real quick.
My very first service.
Your very first service. Okay, I want to hear more about that. But Anthony, can you say his name so I can learn how to properly pronunciate it? This is just something we need to get this off. We need to get this off. I
probably don't even say it right either.
It's Ansang Hong.
So Ansang Hong. There's a Hong.
Yeah.
Ansang Hong.
Okay.
Ansang Hong.
But
it's almost a double O. Ansang Hong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like in phone, that kind of O almost.
I just saw a message actually from a former member who's left, who said, I used to hate you. And one of the reasons I used to hate you so much was because you mispronounced his name.
Really?
Yeah, which I just find ironic. And now she's out and she's come to the light.
Don't.
Yeah.
I just
care.
So
it's something I thought about, to be honest, but I was like,
really?
What? It don't matter. Yeah, I was like, I'm never gonna really say the name ever again anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Right. So right.
Yeah.
But
So it was in the first study you said that you were introduced
First service.
First service.
Yeah. In-person
So-
service. Yeah.
So then what were your thoughts? I mean, I guess what was it was it just the full blown, this is second coming Christ, you know, you have to trust in his name. You can't be saved through Jesus. Was all that kind of laid out on the table? And then what was your initial thought about all of it?
So it was very interesting kind of because the ones who invited me obviously didn't know that was going to be the service, and they knew I hadn't learned about him yet. So I show up, I go to the service, and that's all it's about. And I'm sitting here like, okay. And they get up and they immediately all look at me and they're like, has she run away yet? Like that sort of thing. And I'm like, so I have questions. And so we went upstairs, like where we were in a house branch. So where we served was in like the lower level. So we went upstairs to the dining area and I was asking my questions and I'm like, so, you know, how do I know this isn't idolatry? How do I know this is actually Christ come again? I knew a little bit about it from what I saw through Google, like, but I still couldn't wrap my mind around it. So I was waiting for answers, and they, you know, pointed to all the verses in the Bible where, you know, he's, you know, he comes again before the rapture and before the end times, and and eventually you get into how you know he's going to come in the flesh again, and
So
they
did they throw you in like a
answered
Bible
me
study
enough.
immediately? Like, did they throw you in, like, and just bring you to a room with a Bible and a board and just teach you everything right away? Like, as soon as you had that service, was it like panic? And then they were just like, okay, let's throw information at her, or was it paced out?
I'd say they actually responded better than thinking of how I probably would, knowing what I know now. There, like the dining area, there was actually a board in that room. So we were sitting there. He's like, you know, go to this verse, go to that verse. And I'm like, okay. And it made enough sense to me that made me feel comfortable believing that this is true. And I'm like, okay, well, you've proven it to me basically through what you've shown me in the Bible. And again, that was a big thing, teach from the Bible. Which, you know, but they were able to answer my questions, which, you know, we know that, you know, they practiced that. But yeah, I think my biggest concern at that time was, you know, after you find out about what idolatry is, which I honestly didn't even know about until like recently. And once you learn about what that is, it's like, okay, so now you gotta worry that this is what you're doing, is you are bowing your head and worshiping a false god. And so that they had to prove to me that this was actually God, and they did in enough sense at that time that I was able to believe it.
So your
Sadly
first service, was it somebody delivering it, or was it a video for the
Video.
first? Okay, and then
Yeah.
my other question is, during your first service, when they do the prayer of our wishes, which I'm not sure if Jordan's aware, but at the end of the service, everybody will then say a prayer in Korean simultaneously, like all at once, and it's probably the most culty thing that they upfront do. It's very bizarre for new people. Like, people usually just like freak out their first time seeing it or hearing it. But what was your response to this?
What, Anthony, can you recite? Is it a long prayer, or is it just?
It takes like a minute.
Okay, well, let's not.
It's all in Korean. It's all in Korean.
But everybody
it goes kind of quickly.
But you say it in Korean. Everybody
Yeah,
would
you
say
say
it
it.
in Korean.
Say it, yeah, you say it in Korean. And
What's
Yeah.
what's the gist of the prayer? Like what is it? What is
so
it saying?
what the English translation basically says, like, An Sang Hong, like, Father An Sang Hong, the day of your coming is drawing so near, and we haven't prepared anything.
Mhm.
Let us be reborn in through your Holy Spirit, so we can meet you on the day of your coming without any lack. That's
Okay.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
English version, more or less.
Yeah.
But
That's the
in-
gist of it.
yeah, but
Yeah,
in
yeah.
English, like, "Harale kishina buji an songoni," and it's just
It goes so
It-
fast.
so-
Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's very difficult. And if you have a hard time just saying An Sang Hong, imagine this whole.
Right. Right.
So after this video is on, which they don't choose which video
Right.
typically to watch, it's told to them this is what's going to be for this service.
right.
After that point, after this video that's already been chosen is played for you, and it's all about, An Sang Hong, and they bring you up, you then study about, basically about second coming Jesus must come before the end of the world to repair the
Mhm.
truth that was lost.
Right.
And they show you these things and at least puts your mind at ease. After that, how long was it until you were baptized?
Like I decided that day that I was wanting to get baptized. That was kind of a whole, I'll say, like, everybody has heard by now of the love bombing.
Yes.
That had a lot to do with it. That and like what Michelle has talked about, and probably you at some point, they're countermeasures. So when the fact that I was questioning, and I was like, okay, well, then they knew I had looked up the church online as well. So then we went into the living room and they played
A cartoon?
the videos, cartoon. They played a video of what's the organization? The We Love You Foundation.
Oh, they played We Love You Foundation video, and probably the introduction video to the church was like, well,
Mhm.
look how many churches we have in Korea.
It
And here's-
yeah.
Yeah.
They showed a good at least 4 or 5 videos to me. And I will say whatever they ended with had me very emotional and tears and happy tears. Like I felt they really did a good job making you feel welcomed and comfortable and like you were within a family, like very first time you're there. And I wanted a church family. Like that's part of the reason I wanted to get back into faith is I wanted to have that family. I'd seen my sister going through a hard time. She joined church. She had a church family. And I was like, I feel like that's what I'm missing in life. So that feeling overwhelmed me. And I remember I looked over at the one who had invited me in the first place. And I said, I think I want to be baptized. And she was like, wait, say that again? And everybody got quiet. And I was like, I think I want to be baptized. And everybody got all happy. But they had to call a deacon, I think,
To come and
to this
baptize
branch.
you. And he's probably over a little bit of a drive away. Not to give out
Yeah.
locations. or anything,
3 or
but
4 hours away at least. And
But
so it took
they
a
would
couple
come
weeks.
at the end of the
before
day,
I-
probably. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So-
they immediately messaged the missionary asking if somebody could come baptize sometime soon. And they asked when I'd be available. And I was like, well, next Sabbath day. He couldn't make it the next Sabbath day, so it was the one after.
Okay, so
so-
immediately you had the plan that you were going to, and then how did they interact with you throughout the weeks leading up? So from that Sabbath day, you had 2 weeks of time in between. Were they continuously like inviting you to come over, or was it like how often were you coming over in that time frame to study?
I think I was actually asking at the time when we could do Bible studies, given with my schedule at that time, I had to do virtual mostly.
Yes.
So it was whenever the sisters' availability was as well. So yeah, like within those couple of weeks, we scheduled out a few Bible studies. I couldn't tell you what they were. But I remember I mean, I told you in my email, I was that in it to win it person. Like I
Yes.
wanted to learn it all. I wanted to move far. I thought I was in the spot I was supposed to be in. I was part of the church I was supposed to be part of. So yeah, and actually, because it just popped in my head again, what you were gonna ask about that prayer of our wishes. The sister had given me the card that has the prayer on it, and it's just the English. She's like, you're going to hear us, everybody say this prayer. You obviously don't have to read it because it's in Korean. And I know you don't know it yet, but here's what it is. And when I was sitting, it felt awkward, to be honest, when I was sitting there and everybody else was saying the Korean prayer and I'm just reading it. And I'm like, I don't even know where they are in this prayer to know what they're saying. But that was another thing. I'm like, I need to learn this prayer. Like,
Yeah.
I was on it. And one of the members there actually was studying Korean. So she helped me learn that eventually. And even when I learned it, I couldn't keep up with the pace to say it right. Like my whole time there, I don't think I ever fully said the prayer beginning to end without having to stop at some point because I lost my place among everybody else.
Probably me too. 10.5 years. Probably me too. But no, it's very difficult. So you were in it to win it. Well, so you probably breezed through your basic studies, meaning that they have like a regimen of studies that you're supposed to do. Like it's like a checklist, and then you need to go through it in order for you to be considered a talent. And then they need you to tithe. And I believe that you need to go preaching. Were you finished with your studies by the time that they had you go preaching, or were you still in the middle of them?
I was still in the middle of them. I don't know which feet, like I would go out preaching, but I wouldn't actually approach anybody myself. I'd be with another sister or the group of us would go. But I want to say I was in the first or second Feed My Sheep book before I started approaching people. And that's still to this day, I never feel comfortable. I'm not that person. I never feel comfortable going up to pure strangers who don't know me from the person next to them. Like, and here you are. And it's like, I had to keep in my mind, I was that person at some point. And look how this helped me. Like, I have to be that person now. I have to save these people now, like, or at least try.
About it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so
actually, one of the things that like I've come to realize, I'm not sure if you'd feel like this is true or not. Most, what they call fruit or new people who come in, they don't come in from street preaching. Like you and me, we both did, but it's a rarity. It definitely is a rarity. Like you go out week after week, but it's usually like, oh, this is my friend from, work, or my friend from school, or my cousin, or, like
referrals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I've realized is, why would they keep focusing on non-connection preaching and just street preaching, is because you kind of gather at the church and you sing together, you build this like bond with each other, you go out into the world and then you get rejected, and it makes you almost feel like everything in the world is just hurtful and uncomfortable and unhappy, and people treat you very badly because, well, you're annoying when you go up and you interrupt their day. And then you come back and you get to share this bonding experience with them. It's not really in order to bring people in, but I believe it's more to keep people indoctrinated and for them to feel even more separated from the world. When you were preaching, now that I've explained like my perspective of it, did you feel like a different way about the world outside than you did before? Like, did it make you feel uncomfortable?
I assumed everybody was going to say no to me, and everybody was just going to want to turn away from me as soon as I even said, hey, sorry to bother you. But like, mainly because, and again, it comes back to when they approached me. I'm too nice of a person to do that. But I know if somebody's like me, they'll listen to what I have to say, but they may not go anywhere in there. And that's fine. Like and I eventually had to get used to them saying, I'm busy, I'm in a hurry, I gotta go. I'm like, okay, well, I understand. And then I would say I understand, but then the person I'm with might try and stop them and continue to try and be able to preach for them. And that would make me feel really awkward. I'm like, it's awkward enough that I'm going up to some random person asking for their time to talk about their truth, and they want to get away, and I'm willing to let them go. But now I got somebody who's like fighting for them to stay, and I'm like,
yeah, when they've already told you
that
they don't consent, once they're like, I don't want this. So going through your experience, get into the next part during your journey in the church, your involvement, and then eventually, I guess, some of the red flags that you started to notice, because the love bombing, it fades away. And then it starts to build up with other things that replace it. A little bit more guilt, a little bit more shame, a little bit more responsibility. At least that's what most people say, not to put words in your mouth, but if you could kind of go through what happens after you've, been given this easy introduction and things start to get real.
So, let's see. So basically, I went through Feed My Sheeps as fast as possible just to find out that I couldn't download the app to keep studying until I hit like 6 months in or something like that.
Oh, could you explain what the Feed My Sheep is for those who might not know?
Oh, yeah. So the Feed My Sheep books are a set of books to basically teach you how to preach on these different studies. So you're basically meant to take them with you, as far as I was aware, to when you went preaching. So if somebody actually did give you their time and you said, we're just trying to, how did I say it? We're just out looking to see if anybody would like to join Bible studies. We learn things like the Sabbath day and the Passover. Would you like me to show you more about those things and see if you'd like to join? And if they said yes, you'd open up your Feed My Sheep to whatever chapter Passover's in. And then you would go through it with them kind of quickly, showing them, this is why this is necessary and stuff like that. So the Feed My Sheep, as I took it, was the basics of a full study. It's the very outer layer, so to speak, of the study.
Almost like
it's
recruitment training too. Yeah.
Right. And once you get done with Feed My Sheep, you move into the sermon books. And I had gotten one of those, never finished it, but I was with them 9 months. And so that's how much I went into those. You have to practice your Feed My Sheep books with with other members 3 times per chapter. So go through the book 3 times, have them sign off on it before you can get your next one. And then there's all the other books in between that they want you to read too. The green book, the brown book, Moses, I don't remember them all. There's Mother's book. There's a pile the chosen ones. There's so much reading material. And for me, the Feed My Sheep thing was hard enough because I needed people to sign off on them. And with me not being there every single day and only there for one service at the beginning of my time there, my time was very limited to get these things done. And a lot of the times I would get there in the morning, on Sabbath day, we'd do service, get done, and go out preaching. We wouldn't go into studying. I had no time to practice. So the fact that I even got those done was great in my mind. I had to do them virtually a few times, but, got through them. But my experience was basically, I'm going Sabbath day mornings only. I didn't like not being able to go to all 3 services. eventually started weighing on me because I've been there so many months and I've done so much, and I didn't have time to finish some of the stuff I wanted to finish, that I wanted to be there longer, and I wanted to go to the second and third services, and I wanted to go out preaching with them, even though I didn't really want to preach.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it because that's what we were supposed to do. And then eventually my husband, he was the big reason why I didn't do all the stuff. I didn't spend all day there. Eventually he's like, you know what, if you want to do it, just go ahead and do it. I'm like, okay. So,
and you probably thought
towards
that Father, Mother opened up the way. They saw
Oh, I
your
did.
heart.
Oh man, as soon, because I remember the interaction, my husband and I were texting at the time. I was at work.
Yeah.
And he's like, if that's what you want to do, then just do it. And I'm like, okay.
Were you bothering
And
him
I
about it?
cried. I probably.
Okay.
Hang on.
So he was just being like considerate and giving of that time just because he knew you wanted it so much.
Right. Like I'd been going there for a while at this time, because this probably happened maybe after 6 or 7 months in.
Okay.
So I've been going there a lot. And eventually, on occasion, I might have stayed for the second service and left right after the second service. And even when I started going to all 3, I would leave after the second service, go home, spend time with my husband, and come back for the third service. But yeah, like I cried in happy tears. I was praying to Father and Mother saying, you know, thank you so much. You moved his heart finally. But what I got lost with is I got something I wanted, but another thing that I should have wanted was my husband to join me. If I was in the truth, I should have wanted that time with my husband. And there was a time where I did, but I eventually knew he didn't want to hear anything about it, because he saw me trying to do all this stuff that I didn't have to do, but I'm obviously doing it because I think I have to do it for my salvation.
Yeah, you said before
And
you wanted to go preaching because that's what you're supposed to do. You know, the fact that they make you feel like this is a requirement, this is an obligation put on you, you know, the fact that you feel that way, you know, the compulsion to do that, it's very telling of how they guilt you into these feelings. So
you
so
don't
he
want to
didn't
miss
want
the
anything to do with
blessings.
it. He probably noticed you becoming more stressed and your time being absorbed, and you know.
So with that, I guess, can you speak into that a little bit, like that part of it? Because obviously you and most other people that come into this group are doing so because, like you, they're wanting to discover more of God. They're wanting to find ways to grow their faith and their understanding and relationship with Him. And so obviously one would think that if that's something we're attaining, if we're actually finding that, then that's going to result in, some of the things that the Bible promises, like peace and joy, like our lives improving, not just, externally, but even beyond that, more than that, internally. So I guess with that, like what, even just looking back on your experience now, can you talk a bit about like internally what you feel like it was doing? And basically, I guess my question here can be summarized in: was this giving you peace, peace with God, peace with yourself?
No. I might have thought in a way it was like, I was happy to be around the members of my church. I still love them all to this day. They were a joy to be around, but I never looked forward to going out preaching. I acted like I did. I'd smile and, oh, let's go. Let's all go to heaven together.
That's 99% of us. Yeah.
And, but once you're out there, it literally became just an obligation. It's like, you have to do these things. It's no longer I wanted to, it's that I had to. And preaching was the biggest one that I didn't ever really want to do. But they're like, yeah, you should be preaching to this many people, and you got to keep track. You know, here's our tracker that we keep each week. Make sure you track your numbers each day. And when you get the app, you can track them on there, and we'll record them and send them in. And it's exhausting just thinking about it, to be honest, because it comes down to the fact, you know, I didn't have that kind of time every day. So I was literally finding reasons to go to the store, to go to the mall, to go any public place so I can get at least one preaching on that, like on that thing for each day. Otherwise you feel like you failed.
Can I just,
like,
this is, there are people who make a full-time income doing that exact work, whether it's door-to-door salesmen or selling insurance, and the amount of
that's why I could never be a salesman.
yeah. But it's just, I don't know. This is something that it's, I guess, just one of many countless frustrations, incredible frustrations I have when I hear things like this, because the degree to which like this organization is taking advantage of you, they are getting free labor to have you doing in every way, maybe even more so your level of commitment and time that they're giving, that you all are giving to this labor, you know, beyond what even some who are doing this as a job, the amount of hours and time and mental energy they're putting into it. You guys very often, I would say, are putting even more into it. And yet it's not only that they're not, you know, paying you for this labor, but on top of that, they still require that you tithe to the church. Mm-hmm. And so it's just the whole, when you step back and think about it from that aspect of it, and you consider the fact that, you know, at the top levels, it would seem that, I mean, this organization is being ran by a business, and how just the degree to which they're taking advantage of people by, oh, we can use religion, we can use the Bible, we can use, you know, threat of hell even, to get these people to do all this work that's going to grow our organization, that's going to bring in more revenue, but we don't have to pay them. Not only do we not have to pay them, we can get them to pay us on top of it. I don't know. It's just, there's not really words to describe how frustrated that makes me, for one thing, and just how revealing this is of what this group is. And just how incredibly unfair that is to all of the countless members who are living this out day in and day out.
I'm willing to believe, or even bet, I guess, that they feed off of people similar to me, I guess, who are very ignorant to what the Bible says. Because tithe is actually another thing I didn't know about. I know, like, I heard of it. I know you have to give to the church, but I'd always made fun of that. Like, you should never have to give money. Like, but I think that's coming also from a Catholic's perspective too. You know, pass the collection plate, everybody. You know, the more you put in, the better your blessings will be, that sort of thing. But I'll never forget one day, it was just another stressor that, like, it turned into another stressor for tithes. I remember one day I got to the church, and usually I would get there like a half hour early. And I realized I didn't have the correct change to give for each service. And I was like, well, can I just give my full tithe in the first service, and that can just cover the whole day? I was told, no, you have to have something for each service. So I panicked. I was like, well, I will hopefully be back in time for when service starts. And I went down the street to the store, had to get changed, made sure I got back, and they were already singing hymns when I got back, and I felt terrible that I missed the start. And it was because money is not a stressor enough already. Now you have to make sure you have something for each service that you go to on Sabbath day.
So just to clarify that, so typically they want you to give your 10% tithe at the first service, but then you're talking about the blue envelope offerings. So in addition to 10% of your income before tax, they want you to additionally offer something separate. Now the tithe goes into an envelope with your name on it. The other one is completely anonymous. Like it's not going to be recorded for your taxes or anything like that. This is just something additional that you give, and it has to be every single service. So, well, every single Sabbath
except
day,
third day.
Yeah, you don't do it on third. Third day is like the one exception for it. But
surprisingly,
yeah. And funny enough, like they say, see, we're not money hungry. Otherwise, we'd ask for money
we'll
on
give
third
you
day.
a day.
So there's just one. But yeah, no, it's definitely like that's a stressor. And the fact that, like, you know, circling back, like I think it was really telling when you did say like that's what you're supposed to do, talking about preaching, because it does circle back to what you said about other people's blood being on your hands. Like you think that if you don't tell them, and because you didn't stop that person, and then they don't hear the message of salvation, then they're going to go to hell, and they're going to go to hell because you didn't do enough. So not only is that going to be something that someone's like, God's going to look at you and say, oh, you knew the truth. I gave you my precious truth and you withheld it from this person. And now look at how they suffer because of you. You know, now that person goes to hell, and then they're going to look at you too. And they're going to say like, why didn't you tell me? Like that's the sort of image that they will put into your head. And, you know, imagine that weight of the world on your shoulders.
Oh, and yeah, it was awful.
And then you have to go preach and do this very uncomfortable thing. Meanwhile,
and then heaven forbid they said no. Like my parents, I would talk to my parents about it. I talked to my dad a lot about it. And he was brought up, it was my grandmother was his mom. So he was brought up Catholic. He left that when he became an adult. He did not agree with it. I'm pretty sure he's full agnostic, atheist, whatever you want to say right now, but he does not believe. And I would talk to him about it, and I'm like, you know, I need you to believe. Like, I need to make sure that I see you in heaven one day. Like, I mean, and still to this day, that's on my mind, but not nearly as bad as it was back then. Like when I was in WMSCOG, it was terrible. Like every time I talked to him, he'd tell me why he doesn't believe, and I'm like, but the Bible says, but the Bible says, but the Bible says.
Yeah. So can you clarify something real quick to me about the tithe? You're talking about the 10% of your income tithe that is required on Sabbath, but there's there's at least 4 Sabbaths a month. So how does that pan out? I mean, surely that doesn't mean every Sabbath you're giving the full 10%. Are you like sparsing that out on those different Sabbaths, or how does that work?
It depends on your paycheck. So if you get it every week, you give, like, usually people get paid on Friday. So you go, you take the 10% before tax, you prepare that. And then when you go to the church on like early morning on the Sabbath day, you provide it every week.
Hold on.
So
10% before tax is what they
before tax.
Yep.
Okay.
So
of course,
say it's like $1,000.
So not your actual income, like
not what you're actually getting.
No.
Right.
Not what the paycheck says.
The gross total, not the net.
Yeah, gross, not net. Yeah. So if you get paid $1,000, you might keep $700 after tax, but you have to tithe $100. So you keep $600. And then you have to take from that $600, you have to give an offering every Sabbath service, so 3 services. And then for the feast, they ask you to give a bigger amount. And then once a month, there's a brown envelope, which is like a $30 minimum. And that goes into different directions. Kelsey had just spoke about this on the live stream yesterday, and then there's, food offerings, and it's endless. So that 1,000 that turns to 700, that turns to 600, that turns to pennies.
Ultimately, your whole life should be an offering. Like you're ultimately offering your entire livelihood, your person, your life to this church for your own salvation.
This is criminal.
You're making your sacrifice, even though somebody else already made the sacrifice for us.
Exactly. And they do say too that if you earn $1,000, right, and you keep 700, unless you tithe that $100, like you are stealing. Like if you skip your tithe, you didn't steal $100 from God. You didn't steal that $100 tithe. You stole the whole $1,000 you earned.
So is that things that would have been explicitly taught to you? I mean, like what you just said. Why was that the mentality you had? In what way was that communicated to you guys, where you knew, oh, if I don't give this much, that means I'm stealing this much from God? Like, was that, where did you get that idea from?
The sermons, there's video sermons that are sent out. There's text sermons that are available. However, in order to watch them, you need to have a login credential to their website.
Yeah.
They do have public sermons that are out there, but they're not going to talk about tithe or the end of the world or, great destructions too much. They limit what's public, and then they have the deeper, like they flood the internet with these like very softball videos of their doctrine. But then the deeper, more scary things are, you need passcodes to get into it.
Yeah, I think I had an actual Bible study on tithing. So the person who was doing the Bible studying with me, she was the one who specifically said, we have to give, otherwise you're stealing from God. You're stealing everything from God, not just what you didn't give. You're stealing it all. It's like, oh, so
and
they really put it in your head.
And the sad thing about that scenario there is that you had a victim of that abuse just passing along her own victimization onto you unknowingly. Right. But it's just this, cycle that really this person who taught that to you and passed this guilt and burden onto you. Wasn't, she's not to blame. She's just a victim as much
Poor
as you
thing
guys
was,
were. But
I think she's 10 years younger than me. Like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And that again is a very important point. And I appreciate you bringing that up, Jordan, is that sometimes we look at the people who indoctrinated us, brought us in, were our handlers, and we look at them like they're these bad people, but in reality, I was also one of them, and I believed what they believe, and I did the same thing, and I didn't do it because I wanted to hurt somebody or I thought I was doing anything wrong. I thought I was saving the world. I thought I was saving someone's life. I thought I was doing God's work, and I loved Bomb because I really just wanted this person to stay and not be scared off and not be, taken away from the church, which I thought was the only means of salvation. So, I did the same thing because of what I was indoctrinated to believe and I thought was the right way, God's way. So, it happens with them too. Like, I don't blame them. I don't want any harm on them. Like you said, Katie, these are good, people who you care about.
Yeah.
But it's just the church has made them do bad things without them being aware of it.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever stop loving them. Like they're amazing people. There is not one moment around them that I didn't like being in their presence and talking to them and just having a fun time. I don't blame them for any of it.
Keep them in your prayers.
And
Keep them in your prayers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because I just pray that eventually everyone that I went with will come out of it at some point. It's terrible to see somebody younger than, and I think just almost everybody in my branch was younger than me. That many people getting sucked into it. Now that now that I'm out of it and I know the truth about it, it's so sad knowing that they're still in it. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So and it hurts a little bit that I don't even talk to them anymore.
Would they talk to you if you reached out to them, or have you been completely shunned?
They'd probably talk to me.
Until they see this interview, maybe.
Right. I know when I left, the girl who initially brought me in, she would reach out to me, make sure I was okay, asked if eventually she was asking if I wanted to do a Bible study again, I got to the point, I was answering her sometimes, but I got to the point where I just couldn't keep making excuses. I couldn't keep lying to her. I just stopped talking. I stopped responding. Okay. I felt terrible. So yeah, and the weird thing is my sister-in-law, she actually sees her every 6 months because she works at a dental office that her kids go to.
Oh, wow.
So she's like, oh, she says hi. And I'm like, I'm like, I love her to death, but I'm not about to open that door again. I can't open that door again. So.
Yes. So what I heard was that you were through the church, you were having a little bit of, complications with your husband. And then also you were having some complications with your dad. Would you feel like the church was causing some complications with a lot of your social life outside of the church, or?
Looking back, probably. I think I still talk to my dad a lot. I'm daddy's little girl, so I'm his best friend always and forever. But I wouldn't talk about anything about church to my husband because he didn't want to hear it. Not spending time with him was terrible. My sister, I kept trying to bring her and my niece. She actually did come out to a picnic with me and she sat and did a study. This is when DC members were involved. So I got to meet some of them at that point, and my sister met a bunch of people and she sat down and did a study. I forget which one they did for her. It might have been the Passover, might have been Mother. I don't know. Cause I had been doing Feed My Sheep to her sometimes cause she would listen, but I know she was rolling her eyes almost the whole time I was talking to her. But yeah, now she would tell me, she's like, I'm so glad you got out of that. We would talk, but I tried not to talk too much anymore about that because I knew how she felt. But again, at the same time, I wanted her to join me. I wanted her to leave her church and come to ours because I wanted her to be with me. And I wanted something to prove that I was in the right place, I think. I wanted that fruit.
Yes.
I wanted to bear that fruit. So I knew I was doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because you feel guilty when you don't, right? So,
exactly. You go out preaching, people say no. Some people might sign up for a Bible study and it won't go any further than that. And you just feel guilty. It's like, when am I going to have somebody join? Am I not in the right place? Am I not doing something right? Am I saying the wrong things? What do I have to do to make sure I'm successful within this church?
Yeah, and it's only a momentary relief when you do bear fruit. It really is. It's just
and I never did, thankfully.
You bore fruit today, and you feel so happy and you feel so good.
Mm-hmm.
But then after either they stop coming and it's just devastating, or they continue on in the church, and now you have to bear another one. You have to
you got to keep doing it.
It's never enough. Yeah.
Right.
So even if you did bear fruit, it would only be a temporary high of feeling so good about what you've done before you feel guilt and shame again. But
kind of like finishing one of the books. It's like, oh, I finished it. Okay, here's another one.
Yeah.
And then it's a rotation too. Once you read the books, then it's like, well, you know, you don't really absorb it on your first read. You have to read it again.
You have to go through again.
This one read the book 100 times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's so many things.
All of this, I think, is just so accurately summarized in Matthew 23, where Jesus, you know, pronounces the woes on the Pharisees, and just the description of the behaviors and the practices of the Pharisees, where he talks about woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside also may be clean. For woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. So it's just this fundamental neglect, misunderstanding that this organization has, and then teaches members to have, of an emphasis that is placed almost entirely, 99.999% of the emphasis is placed on outward conformity, outward actions and behaviors and practices, and the tithing, the preaching, all these things that you are required to get to do. And then just listening to you, the fact that within a year of being in this, the degree to which your mind was just consumed with this anxiety about, oh, I'm not preaching enough, and what if that means that says this or that about me and what I'm doing and where I'm at. Just the fact that within a year of you joining the supposed true Church of God, that was the internal experience, that was what your mind was being consumed with, is just so incredibly revealing about where the emphasis lies here. And that is that it lies on getting members to just exhaust themselves to make the outward look good, while inward, you know, the leadership is dead men's bones. And I think inwardly the members who are being victimized by the organization itself, outward they might look good, inward they're dying, and they're starving and they're miserable. And it's just it's such a, to me, clear demonstration, just all the things we've talked about leading up to this point, just that the pharisaical behaviors of this organization is just, I think it's uncanny. It's just so vivid when you just hear former members like both of you guys just describe your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, you're told, and I forget what caused me to get told this. It might have been because it was close to Thanksgiving, but there was something else too. It's like, when they do prayer, don't pray with them. Say your own prayer, because they're praying to the wrong God. If you have, I think I had a funeral I went to. Don't sing Amazing Grace with them. It's the wrong version. Because Amazing Grace, as we know it, is to God and Jesus. Whereas they do have a hymn of Amazing Grace that goes to Unsung Home. So.
Yeah, so they definitely don't want you to participate. They create this boogeyman of the spiritual world out there. Like if you walk into another church, like demons are flying around ready to pounce. And, you know, if somebody says a prayer to the name Jesus over your food, you're now eating food sacrificed to an idol, because they believe in a Jesus, not the Jesus. That's what they teach you. And that Jesus
is real, but there's somebody after him that's more important now.
Basically the devil goes by the name Jesus now, is their spin on it. But
basically
you you were looking for God. They approached you at just the right opportunity. You were also looking for like a church family, that kind of experience that your sister was having in a church that you weren't really interested to join. And they came at the right time, at Walmart, oddly enough, being the right place. And you were passionate about it, but you were being withheld from really being able to participate to your heart's desire until your husband released your time with him.
He released me.
Yeah, he's you know, he's like, go, it's fine if this is what you really want to do. So now, without this restriction on your Sabbath days, with this new open availability to go to the church, this is about 7 months in, I believe you had said, which is getting close
6 or 7.
6 or 7 months in. So this is towards the last bit of your time there. Tell me how it went from being like, I'm all about this, to I need to get out of here. It's, you know, this is not the place for me.
Yeah. Talk about the red flags.
Yes.
Yeah. So looking back, I now see that the more exposed I was, the more time I got to spend around it, the more I figured out there were other questions. So there was more demand. There was more demand from you, basically. So I was all excited I could go to all 3 services, but doing that every week, plus third day service, plus whatever preaching you had to do throughout the week, any festivals or feasts, which I think there was one that I had to keep during that time that I could do all of them. And I kept Passover. These were the ones that you had to get up and be at service by 5 a.m. during the week. So I'm getting up at, probably 3:30 in the morning to get ready, get to church before 5, then go to work for 8 hours, then
go right back to service.
Go to service, probably even go to service in between, because there was a service in the middle of your workday. So I had to leave work, use my sick time or personal time or something to leave, go to service for a few hours, come back, finish work, go back to service. Then it was exhausting. And I do remember it was around Thanksgiving time. My place of work was doing a food drive for homeless veterans. And I was all excited. I was like, hey, I have a church family now that like I could get people on this. And given part of that was kind of selfish, because, you know, if you brought in 5 food items, you've got to claim a day as a casual day so you could wear jeans to work. So I was like, every 5 items, I got a church family. Let's go.
Because you can't wear those jeans to the church, so you might as well wear
Exactly. Well, so I posted in our group chat, I was like, hey, we're doing a food drive where I work. If you want to donate anything, feel free to bring it to the church and I'll get it on Sabbath and I'll be able to bring it back to work next week. Nothing was said, nothing responded, nobody brought anything that week. The next week, I posted again. And then the leading person messaged me, who's the girl's husband. He messaged me saying, I need you to take that off the group chat. I'm like, oh, okay. Immediately, I was like, oh my goodness, what did I do wrong? And I was like, I'm sorry if I did something wrong. I didn't mean to. I'm like, I really please forgive me if I did something wrong. And he's like, it's fine. I'll explain it after service. Well, what they told me and I had to ask, they didn't remember to just tell me. He said that this sort of thing helps somebody in the world and that keeps them in the world. You're not doing anything to help them get to heaven. You're not helping their spirit. You're not helping them come to God. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right. And he brought up, I was in the Air Force. I did Toys for Tots. And that was a big no-no. Can't do Toys for Tots anymore.
Nope.
And I thought of my mom, because my mom would do that where she worked. And I was like, oh man. But then, I just kept thinking about it. And I was like, that really can't be right. Like, there is no way God wants people to starve.
No.
I understand the whole worldly thing, but the Bible says that you shouldn't have to worry, that God will provide on things that you need to live. So God's not going to let you starve. So, but they don't teach you that part. I think it's in the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. They don't teach you that.
Yeah.
So I left service that day, and before I went home, I bought a whole bunch of food. And I did that for several days, and I brought in a bunch of food to work for the drive, because they told me how my heart was in the right place. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't want people starving. These are people who served our nation, who served our country, and they're homeless. Like, they need our help. Like, if they're willing to sacrifice their lives to help people they don't even know, then what are we doing saying no to them when they need us?
Yeah, and that's, they created the We Love You Foundation, and that's supposed to be something that goes beyond faith and beyond anything, so they try to participate in it, but it's ultimately the purpose of the We Love You Foundation is to bring people into the church. Like, it's a front group for the church. And then
it's like a big blood drive, I think.
Yeah. So they don't care about homeless veterans. What they care about is getting credit for giving to homeless veterans. Because I'm sure that the church or, they want to take pictures with them and the veterans. They want to take pictures with them with banners and all this stuff. That's how they want to provide, because they want to take photos so that they can use it to show their charitable work. But if it's coming like in secret, if they're doing something behind the scenes, they don't want it. Like, obviously, like, look what happened with you at this situation where you had an opportunity to help people who serve their country, who are now suffering. They're homeless. They need food. And they had an opportunity to help. And they told you to remove the post so they don't even need to look at it. That's how much it offended them. So, they don't care about any of the things that they say that they care about. They just care about the photo credit. So they're not going to get that from your job. So that's a little bit of reason why. And Jordan, you're probably looking up, like, when you give, like, don't let your left hand know what the right hand.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually that was definitely in my mind, but I'm just looking at Matthew 23 still open before.
Okay.
He says, they do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long, and they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplace, being called rabbi by others. And then he says, he talks about how you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in, which is just another thing that stands out to me here, but a bit of a different point. But yeah, it's just that idea that, when you go out and pray, Jesus would say, don't, go in secret. He's go in the secret place where your Father in heaven sees you. Don't do your deeds to be seen by others. When you're about to do something, don't sound the gong and make a big show of it. And that is exactly what they do, right? Oh, we're going to go out and do a public service. Well, what news organizations can we get a hold of? What a perfect modern example of the precise behavior that Jesus said, don't be this way. Don't do this. And yeah, everything they do in regards to these things. And the We Love You Foundation itself is just a big, nice, shiny, whitewashed tomb that exists to just let everybody know how wonderful this group is, while inwardly everything it's doing is self-serving. The whole existence of this organization, We Love You, and the WMS as well, the whole purpose is just the self-serving purpose. That's what it's not about serving others. It's not about self-sacrificial giving and doing and working for the betterment of those they're actually serving. Its ultimate goal is just to better its own position in the world.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I prayed for me to do something that was worthy, not thanking God for anything, but I was under so much pressure to do things, to bear fruit. Oh God, Father, Mother, please allow me to bear fruit today. Please allow me to go out preaching. Please allow Bible study to happen. Like, and then when you're out of it, you realize that's not what you should be doing.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be praying for your own self-righteousness, so to speak, your own self-worth. So, yeah.
So as you continued on after this event happened, after this kind of like red flag with you seeing a little bit more about the character of the church, continue explaining like other things that maybe helped lead you out.
One of the last things I did with the church was this big preaching event where members from other branches came to our area to help preach and to go preaching with us in our area. And a few of the members, it was I say crazy just because I just don't understand it, but they would be very pushy. And I'm not pushy, so I can't understand that mindset. So we were out in public. We got kicked out of Target. We got kicked out of the mall. Like, this is how pushy and obviously pushy. Like, they had a guy looking for us all around Target for like a half an hour because we kept moving, and just every single person that was passing by, one of us was stopping. And
Target
like,
was the worst
they
to preach
try to
because
walk.
they don't play music, so it's very obvious when you're preaching. It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
quiet.
And
they don't play
they-
music there, so it's like
These people are trying to get past you too. It's like
Yeah.
they see you already trying to get people in front of them, so they're trying to just move past you without looking at you. Don't make eye contact. Like, and I'm like, this. I get preaching, but I definitely started thinking, if I were to preach, I like the way I do it, like quiet. Not to mention, did they ever go up to anybody who is disabled? Did they ever go up to anybody who was homeless? Did they ever go up to anybody who just didn't dress the way that they liked? No, they went up to the young females, supposedly single females. They went up to the young couples. They never went to the the elderly. There was like, you could tell there was an audience that they preached to. And I noticed this probably well before this time, but I didn't let it stay in my head. Like, especially if we were downtown on street preaching and we were just going through downtown, there were several people, homeless people, people on bikes, people in wheelchairs, people just sitting on a stoop or something. Like, you didn't go to them because they weren't clean. They didn't look like they could do, like, I don't know. They made you feel uncomfortable in some kind of way, I guess you could say. You were going to the people who looked well put together. Like,
because that's how Jesus did it, don't you know? Jesus,
right, exactly.
He steered clear of those tax collectors and prostitutes and the crippled and the blind and the lame and the poor. He didn't really, because obviously, God has a target audience. Right. What utter nonsense.
Yeah. And I think I just saw it the most during that time because we were preaching every day that week while they were here. And then, like, when I couldn't make it to preaching on a couple of occasions, it made me feel guilty. And I'm like, this isn't even a service that I'm missing. I'm feeling guilty because I'm not going preaching with a group. And I'm apparently missing out on a blessing from having these members here with us, helping us preach and to grow our church. And like, it was that the veteran thing was probably the biggest red flag. And then when I would, like, there was one weekend I was home and I had a migraine so bad. And I was like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it to church today. And she was like, oh my goodness, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I just have a really bad migraine. I got my blackout curtain shut in my room. I can't open my eyes as the lights are on. And she was like, okay, well, will you join virtually? And I'm like, I mean, I can. Like, I didn't want to lie and say I couldn't because I have a computer. I can join virtually. Like, I can join virtually. I just can't tell you I can keep my eyes open or anything. Like, I don't know how well I'm going to be for service. And she was like, well, if you could at least join and keep the light on so they can see you. Like, okay. And like, even you got to take the picture before service if you're virtual. You got to take the picture after service if you're virtual, because they got to know that you were there. And so the picture I sent her, I'm pretty sure my eyes were squinting. They were barely open. I had the light on so she could see it. And the whole service, my eyes were shut. And I couldn't stand, like, I couldn't stand up for the singing. And the whole time I'm like, you know, am I going to get in some kind of trouble because they're seeing that I'm not standing, because they're seeing that my eyes are shut the whole way? Like, that was my whole thought factor. And I didn't attend the other services that day because that migraine didn't go away, and that just didn't, it wasn't right. And yeah, it was, I know it was before Christmas that I left. And that was a whole thing in itself that they teach you about with Christmas. And it's like, it's not all wrong. But they tell you, you know, you can't celebrate Christmas. It's a sin if you celebrate Christmas. It's a pagan holiday. I'm like, okay, Christ wasn't born on Christmas Day. Got it. But if somebody's giving me a gift, what am I supposed to do? If somebody says Merry Christmas to me, what am I supposed to do? You just don't say it back. Don't say it back. Don't give a gift on Christmas. If you want to give a gift, just give it some other day. I'm like, okay then. So that was a whole thing I had to start preparing for. And I was exhausted at this time. I was trying to do as much as I possibly could keep up with now that I was able to do everything. And I got completely and utterly burnt out. And, you know, after the preaching event and me not feeling well several times after that, actually, I just couldn't do it. So whenever they offered if I could join virtually, which they may not have even done it the last time, I might have said I just couldn't feel good, or I didn't feel good, and they didn't even offer it maybe. I really don't remember. But basically I just stopped going back and I told them I wasn't feeling well. And that's when they started checking in on me. And sometimes I'd answer and say, oh yeah, I'm good. I've just been so busy and I just haven't had the time. Life has happened. Like,
Yeah.
And then eventually I stopped responding because I just didn't want to keep lying to them.
Yeah, because you left because of, like, they were putting your body in like a physical harm when you're trying to do what, you know, they want you to do, but your body is just not able to. You're sick, you know, like you can't even open your eyes. Like, you have, like, people suffer from migraines. Like, it's for some people it's very intense. It's not like, oh, I have a headache, you know, or I feel like groggy. No, it's something that's very, very intense for a lot of people. And for them to have absolutely no sympathy for you, you know, there was no like, is there anything we can do for you? Is there, like, it was just, you know, but you can't keep service. You can't take a photo. You can't, you know, like, it kind of shows that they don't really care about.
You're a cog on the wheel to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they can't, they don't want that cog to go missing. They don't, you know, they don't care about the needs of the cog unless it has to do with their own needs, of course.
Right.
So when you left,
well, then you start learning everybody's a number. Like, and that was something else when I started attending all the time. That's something else you're introduced to during the later times of the day. You get the meetings with the missionaries, you get the meetings with the Eastern pastor in New York, and you see that everything is a number. How many preachings did you do this month or this week? How many Bible studies did you do this month or this week? How many did you do, or how many baptisms did you get? Okay, here are your goals for this month, for this quarter. And you then start to realize you're going for numbers. You are salesmen trying to sell something that isn't true as the truth. You are trying to make money for somebody who's not you. And when that finally dawned on me, it really did change my perspective in a lot of ways, because I hate sales. I hate being in sales. I've been in them before and I can't stand it. And when that became something I had to work with, that's part of the stressor. Like, I need to make sure I preach this much. I got to help the members. I got to help the church. I got to be this part of the body. I got to make sure I'm doing something so they can do something. And like, we got to all work together. I can't be the oddball out. And if I ever went a week without preaching or getting a number for something, I felt like I failed everybody else. And I was just a disappointment. And
they'd make you feel like that too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, like I'd go in, I'm like, I feel horrible. I didn't get any preaching done. And they just look at you and smile and go, oh. It's like,
Yeah. So when you left though, your feelings toward the church's teachings, did you leave believing what they had taught you? Did you leave believing Ansang Home was second coming Christ, and that Gil-Jah was a female god in, this old lady's body? Did you believe all that stuff when you had left, or were you kind of like, yeah, I could walk away from this, I don't really need this?
I didn't know anymore, because in my head, I'm like, if I can leave them, did I ever believe? If I can leave this place, was I truly faithful? If I can leave this place, is it even real? Like, and then you have that fear. Well, what if that was true? What if they were telling the truth and I'm just being lazy now and I don't want to go back? I probably attended one service at their new location when they moved houses after I started the doubting process and thinking I didn't want to go back. I think I went to one more, and it was a third day service. And I didn't go back after that. But yeah, I didn't know what to believe. I remember I would still pray to Father and Mother a little bit shortly after leaving. And I say a little bit because I wasn't sure how to pray. I wasn't sure if I was praying to the right God or not, because I grew up with Jesus. Jesus was the one that you prayed to.
Yes.
And I was taught he's not the one you should be praying to anymore. So now I have that conflicting in my head.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm like, well, I don't want to pray to the wrong person. Eventually, if I prayed at all, I just said, "Dear God."
Mm-hmm.
And my thoughts would then on their own start saying, Jesus, God the Father, God the Mother. Who am I praying to? Like, I'm saying, dear God. And then I'm like, oh no, like God knows my thoughts. So like, what's happened? Like, it was hard like to think when you start praying in general, like you think about everybody saying, oh, I don't know how to pray. I literally didn't know how to pray anymore.
Yeah, no, I felt like what you're saying is exactly how I felt. I felt like, when you're going, because you leave, it's not like you just leave and like you just pick up where you left off and everything's fine and dandy. Like you said, there's all these what ifs. There's this guilt, this shame, these feelings that you have, and you go back, and when you're in this moment of distress, what you want to do most is reach out to God for help. And, you know, you sit down and you want to pray, and then it's just like they've taken that away from you. Like, you know, you want to say,
who's able to give me comfort?
Exactly. And that's one of the worst things that they've done is they've not even given you comfort in God anymore, you know, because they've taught you that God is like, you know, the name Jesus is like you pray to that name and you receive condemnation. It's very, very lonely when you leave. And besides the fact that, like, you know, you just had all these very close bonds with people and now they're all gone. You fear that maybe, like you said, like I was thinking, did I do something wrong? Like if I doubting, am I because like I'm just a bad person, and you know, I haven't been, you know, praying enough. Maybe I haven't been preaching enough. Maybe I haven't been, like, what's wrong with me that I left? Like, you know, you go through all these different things when you leave. So when you were leaving, I'm sure even just after like 9-10 months in the church, you left like, but not unscathed. Tell us about like what leaving was like. What did you experience in that time frame? In addition to, you know, prayers just being so difficult.
The Bible stayed shut. Couldn't read that anymore because if I tried, and I like right in the beginning in Genesis, like there's the verses about God creating man in his image, male and female. Like you can't get past that without thinking of what they taught you. And then there were times where it's like, okay, well, maybe I should go back. Maybe I should go back because that's where I was happy. I was feeling happy there at some point. Maybe I just have to learn more and understand more and just do better. Don't be making excuses. Don't be lazy. But then it turns into, but I've been gone. I left. I haven't even spoken to them. I can't go back. I can't go back because what are they going to think? What have they already thought of me since leaving? And even though part of me thought for sure they'd welcome me back with open arms, it's like I felt ashamed for leaving. Like I couldn't show my face there again.
But oddly, I mean, you mentioned these high highs of being there, like, you know, you felt happy there, but then also, you know, it's like the cycles of abuse, because then I'm sure that there were also very low lows. So, you know, it's kind of like when you leave an abuser, like, you know, you think back to the good times, but you know, sometimes you have to remember.
And you try to forget the bad. Yeah. Like, well, from being abused, like you try to forget the bad and only remember the good so you can accept the fact that you were even there.
Exactly.
And like my sister's boyfriend at the time mentioned at some point that he wanted to come to church with me one day. And when I brought it up to them, they were like, do you know why? Because they were afraid he might have had bad
intentions
of being there to judge and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, I can understand where they're coming from with that. And I was like, no, I don't think so. He seems pretty eager to learn. He never came in, but I found out after the fact, he wanted to see if they were trying to drive a wedge between me and my husband to get us to split up and then possibly arrange something within the church, because I could never get my husband to come. My husband was always the reason I couldn't go to every service and do all the things, because I was anchored by him. Like he's with me. We are one flesh. Like that's how it works. My burdens are his burdens. His burdens are my burdens. Like I can't just leave him and do everything for the church. And you have him in the background too. Like he would try telling me, you don't have to do all this stuff to go to church, like to go to heaven. All you have to do is be saved. That's it. Accept Christ as your savior and you're saved. You don't have to go do all these things. And I'm like, well, the Bible says, it comes back to what they teach you. The Bible says, but it only, you come to realize the Bible says one verse here. The Bible says one verse there. The Bible says one verse here and there and here. And Then you have this whole book in the Bible that says why all of these things are no longer relevant and why your husband is right when he tells you that you don't have to do all these things to get to heaven. Not knowing the Bible is how they will get you sucked in.
Yes.
And thinking that they're teaching from the Bible by teaching in scattered verses all over it is not teaching from the Bible. Like, that'll get you in trouble too. That's what got me in trouble. I'm like, oh yeah, you go to this book, chapter, verse, then you go over here in the New Testament. And that was something that drew me in too. Oh, they're showing you in the Old and the New Testament. They're showing in both how these are done.
Yeah.
But they completely leave out all the context. And I never tried reading around the verses. I never tried reading through each chapter, each book in their entirety. I studied what they told me to study, and then they give you all these other books to read, so you don't have time to read the Bible. That's what I've become convinced of. It's like they give you all these books. Not to mention you have to pay for some of them. If you want these books and you want to learn, you have to pay for them. And
there's discouragement, right, from going off on your own and just going through the Bible, going chapter after chapter. Did you?
I personally didn't experience that, but I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, because, and I don't think I experienced that because I didn't know enough about the Bible to feel like they were teaching me wrong.
Right.
So I was already thinking that they were teaching me correctly from the Bible. So I didn't feel a need to read around it. But now that I have I still haven't gone through every book of the Bible, but I've definitely read a lot of it, a good portion of it, and reading through full books at a time. And now, and this took me, left in like November, early December 2021 until I want to say July or August, July maybe a little sooner of this year, maybe even May. It took me that long to open the Bible again. And that's mostly because my husband and I started doing it together. We started watching a show together that he kept being told about in his profession, like others just kept mentioning it. And he's like, I think we really need to watch this show because it keeps coming up. And I'm like, okay.
Is it The Chosen or?
The Chosen, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we started watching that and I was like, oh. And even in that, like when stuff that was familiar to me from the WMSCOG teachings, when something came up that reminded me of that, I was like, wow, that's totally not the same. And I would then want to read the Bible, not just because of that too, but to even see the accuracy of the show. It's like, I know we shouldn't take what we see on TV as scripture itself. It's all in the Bible. Like your Bible's your scripture. That's the most accurate piece you're going to see. But when we started studying together, that's when I realized I was still not over any of this. I was still bringing up, but my old church taught this. My old church said this about this verse. They said this about this verse. And the reason I brought it up is because I'm reading around those verses and I'm seeing them in the context and I'm understanding what they really meant. My husband got tired of me continuing to bring it up too. He was like, do you want to go back to that church? And I'm like, no, I'm just telling you, this is what they said. And that's not what it was. And he was like, well, I'd really appreciate it if you stopped bringing it up. And I'm like, okay. But it opened my eyes. I really wasn't truly healed from it. And we both basically went through our moments of being saved shortly after that. And I still struggled even after that, feeling guilty that I ever turned away from what I had technically known already. I turned away from it. and I went to something completely different and wrong. And like when you go through the Bible, it's like the biggest thing you can do is say no to Jesus Christ. And that's essentially what I feel like I did. And I think I've gotten over that guilt now because, you know, I went through watching your videos, Jordan, and they've actually helped a lot because just seeing like Anthony's, Verdine's, Michelle's, Jeremy's, like all the testimonies, they helped me heal through it because I now see that not only have other people gone through the same things that I have, they've probably been impacted worse because they've been around longer and they were in it longer. Like I
don't diminish.
I couldn't
your
imagine.
experience, though. You know,
no, I know.
Yeah, you definitely, you know, maybe, you know, we never want to compare like one person's, you know,
I know.
with another, but like, I know what you mean, but I feel like, you know, even the fact that you took all that, you know, time off, probably as much time as you were in the church, you took that time off, just about, and then it's still in your mind. It's still something that, you know, is a worry for you that you just kind of push on the back burner, but it was lingering, and it's good that, you know, because like we were talking about reading the Bible, I know that for me, like I would read the Bible, but I wouldn't read the Bible in its context because I just knew, oh, when I get to this verse randomly, this is what it's talking about. And I would kind of, even though reading the context, not get the context because I thought I knew the context. And then, you know, because you have these pre-implanted explanations of what that means. So when you get to it, you know, you are already pre-assuming what it is about. So you neglect what it's saying in context. Like you have to consciously take yourself back and just remember, read it with fresh eyes, read it like brand new. But did you feel when you started to return back to Jesus, when you started to come back to the church, you had mentioned the guilt you had felt for denying Jesus before and for following the name Ansang Hong and for like following this secondary, you know, additional non-existent female god. But looking back, like, how do you, as a Christian, look back at the things you had done before? And I know that like there's so much forgiveness and welcoming in, you know, in the Bible through Jesus. But what was your, like, how have you dealt with your previous time of believing something non-biblical in such intensity, you know, and denying what you had once known?
Basically, so I'd say the moment I can go back to the moment I was saved, I literally just fell to my knees crying, and I finally prayed to Jesus for the first time. And I asked him, you know, come in my heart. I need you now more than ever because I now know that I was in the wrong. And whenever I started feeling guilty after that, it's like, I know I've been forgiven. Nothing will ever compare to the guilt. Like nothing I've done in my life, I don't think will ever compare to the guilt I felt from that, from being in WMSCOG and understanding how wrong it was. And every time I would feel guilty, I would just pray. And I'm like I would just pray, like, you know, help me through this guilt. I know you've forgiven me. Help me forgive myself. And forgiving myself was hard. And especially when I know in the Bible it says, you know, if you can't forgive others, how is God supposed to forgive you? And it's like, well, if I can't forgive myself, even though I know I've been forgiven, like I should be able to forgive myself. But I just prayed. And now, after it's been a while, like the guilt has definitely subsided. I know I'm where I should be now. I say attend church, but we actually do a live stream of church from home every Sunday because the church we attend is actually not local. We have too many churches that are local that don't teach the biblical truths, I guess you could say. Like there's at Elevation, you got a lot of man-centered churches here.
Okay.
Not so much biblical God-centered churches. So I've been helping an old family friend of my husband's with his website. He used to be a pastor for the church that we attend, and he was a professor in college and taught the truths of the Bible. So he actually created his own website, and I help him with that. Like I take care of, I've completely reformatted it basically. Like I got the design, I guess, for it, and he just adds the material in. And that's been a huge help, just having access to his studies. Studying with my husband together was a huge answered prayer for me. The fact that we even started that together has been a huge help in my faith and my growth, and to help me realize that I'm definitely where I need to be now, because now I'm with my husband. I'm not alone. I'm not fighting against anybody to be faithful to to God. I'm where I need to be. This is where I'm supposed to be. So if this isn't true, then I don't know what is.
So I had 2 quick points. First is just I recently got an email from a former member who was very concerned, and I've heard this come up before about the unforgivable sin and this fear that, well, I put my faith in the name of Ansong Hong. I kind of rejected the name of Jesus for that time. Have I committed the unforgivable sin? And this is something that me and Edgar and I are going to be doing a video soon, answering some questions, and this is one of those questions. So we'll dig into this more. I just wanted to say real quick too that for those who might be feeling that's similar sort of guilt, fear. There's I don't want to minimize what it is to, put your faith in Ansong Hong, but I also want to say Ansong Hong, but I also want to say that most every single person that gets into this group and puts their faith in Christ Ansong Hong instead of Christ, they're not doing so willfully. They're doing so out of a place of a lot of ignorance about what they're doing. And you think about Jesus on the cross was praying to those who were crucifying him. He was saying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And so what you have done in embracing another name of Christ, that is not the unforgivable sin. There's so much misunderstanding that people just get wrapped up in so much unnecessary fear about the unforgivable sin, and it sounds like that happens in this context as well. There's even a biblical distinction between sins of ignorance, and those that are intentional and unintentional sins. It's even a principle in the law of Moses. And so just to say that this is not something that's too big for God to handle. This is not something that God is shocked about. I'm like, oh my gosh, how could she have possibly done that? I can't get over this. I would just say that to think about God in that way, which will just continue to fuel guilt, I think is in some parts at least, to still hold in your mind a perception of God that was given to you by the WMS, because God's not like that. He's not angry at you about what you did. He's like the father of the prodigal son who's just overjoyed that you just came back home where you belong. And so the second thing has completely left my mind. So Anthony, if you have another question, I'll hand it back to you.
No, I mean, here's the one thing I'll also bring up is not only did the church make us feel disconnected from the name Jesus, but something that we brought up on the live stream yesterday is that looking at pastors, looking at priests, looking at any leadership at another church before, we were taught, like, you know, avoid those false prophets. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. You know, we'd look at them in fear and feel so uncomfortable around them. Every other church building we'd see, we'd look at it and be like, ooh, so scary. Oh, it's full of demons. It's full of, you know, evil spirits. They created fear in us. So not just here we are looking at, you know, the name Jesus negatively, but we look at all other churches and all other spiritual leaders negatively as well.
Yeah.
For you, overcoming those fears, taking that opportunity to go back into another church, go back into a place of involvement with a faith, was there a lot of hesitation with it, or by this point were you comfortable?
Honestly, if my husband didn't bring it up first, I most likely wouldn't have. But when he did, I think I was actually overjoyed at the fact that he was interested in growing his faith, that I was all in it with him. I was like, let's do this, because I have my own demons I need to get rid of, and I need to figure out where the truth is again. I need to come back to Jesus Christ, essentially. Like, and I mean, we're taught, you know, he will never leave you nor forsake you. He's not willing that any of us shall perish. So as Jordan was saying, you realize that just because you did turn away from Jesus in that moment of ignorance, so to speak, I'm sure it essentially broke his heart, but he's definitely overjoyed when you decide to come back. And when you accept him back into your life, and he will absolutely get you through all of it, and all of the healing, all of the healing you need. He will definitely see you through it, and I'd say it's been a lot better. I thought joining back into Christianity would be hard. I thought joining any kind of faith would be hard because I wasn't sure how much trust I'd be able to put into it. But it definitely helped that my husband was with me, and it definitely helped me believe that this was the truth, because I couldn't do it again on my own. I couldn't go through something like that and have my husband fighting me on it. It didn't seem right the first time, and it scared me that it would tear us apart the first time. So that we're together now, just it basically confirms everything for me.
Yeah, it's definitely amazing to see the night and day comparison to the one church that had you at odds with him and had you at odds with your family, and now this one that has brought harmony, you know, that brought your family even closer together. So it's, you know, they deny that the church splits up families, but the way that they make you live and the way that they alter your life, they put themselves above everything in your life. And honestly, like the fact that, you know, your family was even concerned that the church was trying to drive wedges between you and your husband, that they were noticing signs of that. It you know, it just shows kind of how like corruptive and corrosive this WMSCOG organization is. So, you know, I'm very happy for you that, you know, even though you went through this experience, in a way, it was almost like a catalyst for you and your husband in time to find faith. You know?
I do believe I had to go through that to get where I am now. And like my husband had always said he was a Christian, but he realized he was never truly saved because he didn't want to leave the way he was living. And he was brought up in the church. He'd been going to church his whole life until he was an adult and he went to military, like he went into the Air Force. But since then, he just wanted to keep living the way he wanted to live. He believed in God, he believed in Jesus Christ, but he wanted to live the way he lived. So yeah, I think I had to go through what I did to see the wrong that's out there, I guess you could say. And to understand when the time came that Jesus Christ really is the truth. And the Bible is God's word. And this is what you need to know. And you don't have to do everything in your own flesh. You don't have to, like, you should preach the gospel to people. Like, you should at least tell them if you want to, but it's not, you're not doing it for a number goal. You're not trying, you're not doing it so other people see that you're doing it.
And also your relationship with God isn't hinged on whether or not you do. It's
Right.
not as if I do this today, then I can go and I can hang out with God today. I can be in his presence.
Right.
I can have fellowship with him. If I don't, then that's not the case. That's not
Exactly.
That's not even part
You
of the
don't
equation.
feel any sort of obligation. You know God's working in you, and he's gonna have his will be done in you as long as you let it be done. If you're meant to go out preaching somewhere, you will have the urge to do it.
Yeah.
But like, again, I'm not that person. I haven't even really
Yeah.
done it like since being saved. I've been studying the Bible. I don't want to talk about it really to anybody until I know for sure what I'm talking about in the Bible is accurate. I know the Bible's accurate. What may come out of my mouth when I'm talking about it, I might get words wrong. I might get something mixed up. And it's already happened just talking with my husband. He's like, that's not what it says. And I'm like, really? And I'd go back and I'd look, and it's like, oh, well, see, this is why I don't talk to other people about it. So,
like you preach through your lifestyle, you preach through your,
Mhm.
you preach through who you are. It doesn't
Right, exactly.
mean you're going to go interrupt somebody in Walmart in order to do
Right.
it. You should.
I'm not going to be
shine the
Apostle
light,
Paul
yeah.
in a synagogue fighting
Yeah.
against the Pharisees. I'm not going to be doing
Yeah.
that. But, if anybody were to
Different
meet
age.
me, they would see. Like,
Yeah, there's a kind of a strange and I think unhealthy guilt sort of motivated association that not just in the WMS, but I've been in certain streams of evangelical Christianity as well. I mean, I was in a place in my early teens where we went to different parts of the country and we'd go up to people at Disneyland. We'd walk up to people at the beaches and well intended. And I'm not saying that that's always wrong, but just the whole knowing where I was, why I was doing it, what I was doing, and that whole approach, I just look back on and cringe and think that it just wasn't. Yeah, I just think there's this false sense of guilt that people have that, oh, I'm expected to be, if I go to Walmart, at every turn, I need to be, telling somebody. And that's not to downplay telling people about Christ and what he's done in you, but that should come from a sincere, like, overflow place, not a guilt. I have to do this or else kind of place. But
send your picture to prove that you're preaching.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
I suppose we should wrap this up here. Anthony, I know you have some meetings to get to.
Yeah.
Though I guess the last question I wanted to ask you, and then Anthony, if you have anything, I'll let you kind of had the final question, but was just that, a few moments ago you were talking about, in a rather confident and sincere way. And I'm sure if we spent more time with you, we'd see even more of it. But what I'm noticing just listening to you in a few moments here is that as you're talking about in Jesus, there's healing, there's this, there's that, and you're saying it with a sense of like confidence and assurance. And I don't know, there's just something about that struck me about how you were kind of saying that a few times that my immediate thought was, oh, that's a different person I'm seeing there than what you've just spent the last, 2 hours describing. And so I'm wondering if you can maybe speak a little bit to coming back to kind of my earlier question about peace, when I asked if you had peace in any measure in the WMS, and maybe if you see a distinction between what your internal experience is now with Christianity as compared to what it was in the WMS's version of it.
So It's kind of funny because I honestly didn't notice that myself, but it makes me feel good that you noticed that. So I'd say like, so in WMS, I remember whenever I would always say, you know, oh, we have the truth. We have the truth. But I will say when we went out preaching, I feel like an idiot, like going up to somebody, oh, have you heard about Mother? Do you want to learn about the Passover? Like, and then should anybody want to come to the church, like my sister, whenever I'd want to invite her over, I'm like, well, if they say God bless you all the time, don't worry about it. That's just what they do. Like, that's their way of saying hello. That's their way of saying thank you, stuff like that. It's like you kind of had to walk on eggshells a little bit because they were so different. And they do have a completely different doctrine than what anybody is used to hearing about. And yeah, it was like walking on eggshells. So you had your obligations, you had that you had to worry about. Heaven forbid you did something that they didn't agree with, and all of a sudden you don't have enough faith, you did something wrong, you've sinned against God.
Right.
It's almost like, I say Catholicism, but it's an extreme in my mind to that sort. Looking back, it's that kind of extreme where they place pressure on you. But now there is peace. There is complete peace with me following Jesus Christ now. Like, I know he has helped me through the healing that I've gone through since leaving and since praying about it. I didn't pray for that long of a gap between leaving and being saved. I wasn't praying any of that time. But as soon as I started praying again and I prayed to Jesus and I felt the difference in my life, and I've been living a different life, it's brought a lot of calm. And if I've had any questions, I can actually get the answers either in the Bible or from the studies that I've been doing through the church or through the pastor that my husband's known since he was a kid. But most of my answers have come from the Bible. Like, I find myself now, when my husband's even having a question about something, if he's going through something in his life, his work or something, I'm like, okay, well, what did it say here? Like, remember this book, remember where it said this. And I may not know exactly where, I may not know book, chapter, verse by heart, but I know what it said and what it says there in order to be able to have an idea where to look. And I find myself always looking back to the Bible now. And I don't have to worry about condemnation if I have a question, if something doesn't sound right, if I don't understand something completely. I know it may not be my time to understand this yet. So I shouldn't be so focused on it. There's something else that I need to be focused on. And it's been an amazing few months since all this has gone down. And my husband and mine's relationship has been, I feel like, better than it probably ever has. We've been together. It'll be 13 years in February. We've been married just over 5 years. And the fact that we're growing together in faith and we're both learning together, it's been amazing. Like, there's still kind of that hint. It's like one of us might judge the other based on how we're projecting our faith, and, you know, should they really be doing that? Should I really be doing this? Like, that sort of thing. But I mean, it's never caused any sort of conflict. I think that's probably just it's a human thing to do that. But no, I have no regrets in my mind from WMSCOG for being with them. I know that was part of my journey. It had to be part of my journey to bring me to where I am and to be able to put my faith wholly and completely in Jesus Christ at this point in time in my life.
Excellent. Well, for me, my kind of final question, and it's gonna wrap up into something that I feel like Jordan probably wouldn't ask himself. However, if you look at the general Christian population, no one really thinks that some group like this can get them until they get them, or someone they love. Like, it comes out of nowhere. Getting information out is vital, because the more stories that are told, the more information that's out there, the more people could be prepared when a group like this approaches them. Not just this particular organization, though. This is the one that, I'm aware about because of my experience, and you're aware about because of your experience. However, the Great Light Studios and the Answering, the WMSCOG, these are sources that are helping people and getting information out. And I know that you've been watching Jordan's videos, and it's been helpful for you. If you could kind of maybe speak about what this has done in order to help you in your journey, having this resource of Great Light Studios, and how it's helped you.
It's been an outlet. When I left and we started studying the Bible, me and my husband started studying again. When I realized that I hadn't fully gotten over everything that had happened and leaving, and I realized that there was a big part of me still needing to heal from all of this because I was stuck. This was an outlet for me. I couldn't talk to my husband about it. Couldn't talk to my sister about it. Couldn't talk to anybody about it because they wouldn't understand. Nobody I knew was with me. I couldn't go to them, like the church.
And some people might have even considered it.
Right. And I couldn't pray. I didn't know how to pray yet. And it was huge to me that I could see that other people have gone through this, that it wasn't just me. I could comment here and there, like explaining, oh, this is exactly what I've been through. Oh, I know that experience. Like, it was literally an outlet that I can, it helped me let go because I could get it out. And this, like, just sending you guys the email with my testimony, that was probably the biggest thing. I was able to tell you my entire story. Didn't even care if you wanted an interview or not. I just wanted to give you guys my testimony. And like, there was a time I probably, like, early on, I was probably dying to get an interview with you, but I was like, no, I realized what I really just needed was to tell somebody, anybody who would listen what I went through, who might understand what I went through. And once I could get that off and outside of me, I could move on from it. And that's exactly what happened. Like, before this interview, just like when we said that we would interview and everything, once I sent that email and once I got your response, it was like my feelings, I guess, were validated, so to speak. Like, somebody's answering, Anthony answered me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, he's been through this. Like, he's one of the interviews that I've watched. And I was like, it just felt great to have somebody to talk to who knew and understood. And that way I could make peace with it. I could move on and heal. And with prayer, like I said, prayer helped a lot. Like, I kept praying. I prayed before I sent that testimony just to make sure that was even what I should be doing. It's like, just pray that I can heal and move on from this. Like, I'm tired of hanging on to this. Let it go so I can let go of any kind of guilt, so I can forgive myself and just keep moving and grow in my faith now. So that was the huge thing. Like, if anybody has left, just know that this is a great outlet.
And you know what? It's good because you found it when you left. Some people find it while they're indoctrinated in it, and it helps them be set free. And hopefully it could be preventative for other people, whether they're just joining or just hearing about it or never heard about it before, and now they're aware. So, having this resource like has been so helpful for me. It's been helpful for you. It's been helpful for a lot of people. So I just kind of wanted to, put that out there, that it's been very helpful, and we were really thankful that you've reached out, you've connected. There's a lot of ex-members who, it's not just you. You were describing it like your husband, he's not going to get it. Your family's not going to get it. It's a very lonely feeling. No one's really going to get, like, I tell people about it a lot, like there's no way I'll talk about myself without this being like a topic, like, oh, why'd you move to the area? And I can't say anything, but I escaped a cult. I can't be honest. I was dishonest for so long about like what was happening in my life. Now I just have to say what really happened. But it's definitely it's great to be able to come together with people who understand, and it is very healing. So if you have anyone additionally you just want to talk to afterwards, we have a great group of people to chat with, and as you need, pick it up as you need, put it down as you need. But it's definitely great to have a community.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for saying that, Anthony. And I'll just say that if anybody would like to do what Katie has done and just sending a testimony over, I've actually, throughout the past several years, I have a lot of people that do that. They'll say, I'm not really ready for an interview. Here's my story, and lay out sometimes paragraph after paragraph. They're just kind of venting. So I don't think that your experience there is unique. I think a lot of people feel that way, where they need somebody to say this to, somebody that they know will understand. And the vast majority of people in most of their lives, most people coming out of this, if they walk up and say, hey, I was in a Mother God cult and this is what happened, people are gonna be like, what in the world are you talking about? But I think what people probably find in platforms like this is like, oh, look, there's somebody who gets it. There's somebody who is saying things that I know they can hear what I say. They can hear about my experience and validate that you are right to feel the way you do. It is okay that you feel the confusion, the frustration, the hurt, the disillusion about faith and everything else. It makes sense. And there's people here, hopefully people here that can hear your story and say, we get it, we understand, and it is okay where you're at. And so if you want to reach out to us, and whether to share your testimony, if you're interested in doing an interview, if you just want to talk behind the scenes to a former member, you can reach out to WMSCOG answers at greatlightstudios.com, and that will be in the description of the video. And then also all this, my long-term goal is to be able to do Great Light Studios and the second channel answering the WMS full time I would love that. That's been a goal for the last 5 years. It's been a bit slower getting there than I had hoped, but that's okay. I think moving in that direction. And so I want to say thank you to the multiple people who have joined support on Patreon over the past few months. And if you do want to support Great Light Studios and just help all this continue to be done and more of it and done better, I and others doing this work have a lot of plans for projects and things to do in the future that I think need to be done and will just be a huge impact. And so if you want to support, you can also find links to support Great Light Studios in the description of the video. And the hope would be that this can grow. There's other people beyond me doing work here. And I would hope that, there's enough work to do here that hopefully in the future others can, spend more time doing it and all that. And so, Katie, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed hearing your story, your perspective, and especially how you came out on the other side and you found a faith in God that you've continued walking in. That is just something that is quite different and distinct from the one you had in the WMS.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me. It's definitely been a pleasure talking to you guys.